Tonight's programme is going to be phenomenal.
I'll tell you, it's only once in a super blue moon that you'll see this. Not about doing yoga, but what it's saying while it's doing it. It's fascinating and it's new to science.
So tonight, in the cold moonlight, welcome to Winter Watch.
Hello and welcome to Winter Watch 2018. Coming to you live from the Sherborne Park Estate, managed by the National Trust up here in Gloucestershire. Our home for Spring Watch, Autumn Watch and now Winter Watch. And our mission as ever is to bring you the very best of the season's wildlife. So we're down here in Sherborne. A bit later in the show, we'll be going up to Islay on the west coast of Scotland to meet Gillian, and tonight she's looking at geese. But, you know, things have been going really well so far. Last night, what about that little mouse that froze after it was scared by the owl? For 5 minutes, 22 seconds, absolutely stock still. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. This week we've also shown you Kate Bush and Mark Armand live on the programme. In fact, we've even had a tweet from Mark Armand saying how pleased he is to have a badger named after him on Winter Watch. As yet, we've heard nothing from Kate Bush.
I'll tell you what, it's very chilly tonight, but it is a special night because it's a super blue moon. What does that mean? Well, it's super because it's closest to the Earth, which makes it appear 14% bigger and 30% brighter. A blue moon is when you get 2 full moons in 1 month, and that happens about every 3 years. And if you haven't seen it, it's worth going to have a look. Not until, of course, after the programme is finished. But we saw it, didn't we, just before the show, and it was it was a lot brighter. It was
huge,
absolutely beautiful.
It was orange to begin with too.
Yeah.
Sort of the colour of your
No,
jacket.
not quite.
Sort
not
of.
quite.
Nothing.
Almost.
It's
But
quite
you know,
that colour.
elsewhere in the world, it's a super blue blood moon, which is everything that we've got, and a lunar eclipse only happens every 150 years. So it's a very special night. But you know what happens when it's that sort of moon? People can go really crazy. I mean, anything could happen tonight.
Well, not anything. Not anything. Careful.
You never know.
You get what you wish for sometimes.
When we arrived last week, we got a tip-off from a gentleman called Brian Agg in the village of Sherborne. He said there was a very curious thing going on in his back garden, and would we like to go and film it? And in fact, our intrepid researchers went down off their own bat, took a little camera with them, and put it where Brian was sort of suggesting, and they filmed something extraordinary. Now, have a look at this picture. It's quite hard to see. See that? That white animal? What on earth could that be? It's not a rat. It's not a ferret. It turns out, incredibly, it's an ermine, which means it's a stoat in its winter coat. Because although stoats are normally fawny colour during the summer, some stoats, some, go white in winter. But it shouldn't be down here white because it's meant to camouflage it against the snow, and it's not really doing a good job of camouflaging it, is it?
Hasn't
really?
worked.
Let's be
Really
honest.
hasn't worked.
So what's going on, Chris? Why?
Well, a complex of reasons why stoats become white in the wintertime. There's a genetical element, there's a day length element, and there's a temperature element. So quite what's going on with this stoat down here, I don't know.
It's totally
got it badly,
mystifying, isn't it?
Oh, very good.
Sorry.
Like your work.
Now, if you've seen an ermine, a stoat, a white stoat, we'd love to hear from you. Send us any photographs or videos of them. We would love to see it because it's a magical little animal.
We love it when you keep in touch and get involved in the Winter Watch conversation, and there are plenty of ways that you can do that.
The easiest way to reach us is to go online and be our friend on social media. You can like us on Facebook, adding your pictures and comments to our page. Follow us on Instagram and tag us in your photographs. Or tweet us your questions at BBC Springwatch. And if you still can't get enough, our website is full of exclusive videos, in-depth articles and links to extra information.
True to form, we have a number of remote cameras scattered around the estate which allow us to look at the animals that they're living there without intruding on their behaviour and their ecology. They never know the cameras are there. And we've got one set up about a kilometre away in that direction in a wood. It's our woodland feeding station, and we're watching it day and night. In the daytime, we've had a range of visitors, including this muntjac. This is a female muntjac deer. They were introduced from China, and they're now set to become the commonest deer in the UK, we're told. Jays have been very active down there. We're baiting this site. There's lots of food out, lots of nuts, some of them hung in the tree, attracting greater spotted woodpeckers and, of course, grey squirrels, which seem to be quite numerous here. Nuthatches, all sorts of other things down there. We were watching it at night as well, though, and early morning. So this morning, although it looks dark in this shot, it's actually just getting light, and that explains the activity from the squirrels. They're a diurnal rodent, don't normally come out at night. Muntjac are still there, but look at this. The grey squirrel has the temerity to take on a mammal much larger than itself, and it drives the muntjac away. What about that?
What a cheeky squirrel.
Very full of themselves, the squirrels. But the muntjac are always very nervous little animal, aren't
Yeah,
they?
they
Which is
are.
probably wise.
I don't think it's because it's a squirrel. I think it's just because it's something moving quickly close to it, because they are skitty, those muntjac.
I like them. Have you seen a muntjac near you, Chris?
Yes, we have lots of muntjac at the moment, actually, yeah. And then, I mean, the thing is, they don't do a lot of damage to farm crops and forestry, but they do eat a lot of vegetation on the ground. Therefore, they're impacting negatively on butterfly populations and woodland bird populations, so I hate to say it. In some places, they're making a nuisance of themselves.
Right, I like a little muntjac, mate. Now, the cameras that Chris was just showing us that we recorded on, they're live, of course, sometimes. In fact, now, let's go to them live and see what's going on. Oh, what a magical scene that is in the woods. Nothing much going on there, though. And here's this one. Now, we have seen, as you know, a lot of action down here. Can you see anything there at all? No. Nothing much there at all. Well, we've also got our thermal camera, which is out roving around the countryside. Let's see whether there's anything on the thermal camera. Yes! Now, Chris and I were having a little argument about this before we came on air.
Oh, the
Is it
ears
rabbit
are
or a
up.
hare?
I think it
I
looks
said
more like a
rabbit.
hare.
It's rabbit.
Oh, it's rabbit.
It's rabbit.
Oh.
No, it's rabbit. Yeah.
Sorry,
Very
Chris, you owe me
difficult to
sixpence.
tell.
But isn't that marvellous? Lovely. You can see how warm it is around the head. Well, the whole body's quite warm. I'd have thought it would be less warm in this freezing cold night.
Cold tips to the ears, though. Look at
Yes,
that. The
yes.
black there, which indicates that it's cold. So it's got cold ears. It's not going to pump warm blood into the tips of those extremities, though. What a waste of heat that would be.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that it's thermoregulating.
His ears are a bit like my feet right now, actually. A little bit on the chilly side, not much
Very
blood going
cold,
into them.
very cold.
Now, it's not just live cameras that we have on the watches. We also have pre-recorded wildlife films. And for those, it's very important to have three elements. Now, obviously, you need the wildlife pictures, and then you need a bit of music, and you need words on top of that. But usually that's done by three individuals that are working separately. So what would you create if you had a shared experience? Well, we wanted to put that to the test. So we sent out wildlife camera woman Sophie Darlington with a couple of her close friends, musician Ali Friend and a writer Ben Webb. And they went to West Sedgemoor in Somerset Levels, where they went to look for wildlife and a little bit of inspiration.
We've been friends for years and we've all got different sort of disciplines and jobs and lives. But the one thing that absolutely binds us is a deep love of nature. Being with Ben and Ali is an extraordinary thing. It's very, very different to anything I've ever done before, mainly because you never usually take a double bass out with you into the wild.
Oh, there's no way I'm going to get through there.
West Sedgemoor is known for its winter flocks, and it's very much within a kind of working landscape. These Somerset Levels are the perfect place for the birds to come in during harsh winters in Northern Europe. Thousands and thousands of widgeon and teal. There's 50 to 60 cranes that live here year-round.
Well, the good news is there's plenty of cranes.
The bad news is...
But the bad news is they're quite a long way away.
Cranes have an extended trachea, which means that they make a particular bugling noise, which it carries and is the most atmospheric noise.
When I experience nature, I'm very often looking at it from a sound point of view. I think my ears experience things almost before my eyes do. The crane's call is quite harsh, quite cranky, They're slightly plaintive and very loud. We want to be heard above everyone else.
Is there a note they're singing in, do you think?
C, there's a C sharp. In nature, C is a really common.
Is it?
If you hear a sort of a general sort of hum of wildlife, it tends to be around a C. The C sounds right out here.
I'm filming away and I can hear Ali playing the bass. It's almost like the sound waves of the bass, which fit really beautifully into the landscape. I'm watching it down the lens.
It's brilliant, isn't it? Look, there's a perch.
It's a pike.
There's a chub on the way. Look at that. Amazingly beautiful, isn't it?
My favourite moments every day have always been dawn.
Check that out.
Even though they've been at times the most frustrating.
Here comes the rain again.
The weather inevitably will affect moon experience. It's been quite wet and quite cold. And the mood reminds me of a Dickensian novel and the low estuarine landscape. We live in an era of shared experience with selfies and that sort of thing. Shared memories are more enjoyable than ones that are tucked away in your own consciousness somewhere.
What a beautiful place. Later in the show, we're going to see the results of those shared memories in a film that captures the mood of West Sedgemoor and its wildlife. Well, this is our third night on Islay. We have come to RSPB Reserve, Loch Gruinart, on the edge of a sea loch. Let's take a look at the map to see where we are. This was our first night on Islay where we filmed the otters. Last night we were down here on the O with our golden eagles. And tonight we are up here on Loch Gruinart. And as ever, to really appreciate this place, we've got to see it in the daytime. Now, this is an area of low-lying marshes. And there is the hide that we are in tonight, right there on the bottom of the screen. And in the background, you can see the edge of the sea loch. This is a refuge for thousands of wildfowl and waders in the winter. And one family that uses this in particular are the geese. And they come here in their thousands. This truly is one of Britain's greatest wildlife spectacles. And the commonest species of geese that comes here is the barnacle geese.
Over 50,000 birds arrive here from Greenland each year late in the autumn. And they're joined by another species, the Greenland white-fronted geese, and over 5,000 of them. Now, why do these birds all come here? Well, there's no land predators for one, but mainly because there's plenty of good grazing. The farmland and the marshes makes this place a real haven for these birds. And this hide just outside here is a known roosting site for white-fronted geese. We've rigged some microphones out here tonight so we can get a listen, and let's just see if there's anything going on outside. It's pretty quiet out there. It's possible that because it's such a bright moon, it's a very clear night outside, and the geese may be making the most of this bright night to go out feeding. But we did record a little bit of calls earlier in the day, and let's have a listen to that. Now that's chat. Those are contact calls. Now this is something that makes these geese really, really special. They use these contact calls to hold their little family groups together. This is quite rare in birds, social behavior. And to really appreciate that, let's take a look at this. Now, at first glance, it looks like these are large flocks of geese, as you'd expect. But when you look closely, you start to see that they congregate in these small family units with birds of different ages. This year's young don't have black bars on their chest. That's like the bird there on the left. The bird behind it has black bars. That's an adult. Now, these family units, these groups, have more than just two adults. There's the breeding pair, but there's also non-breeding adults from previous years. Now, the advantage of this is they work together to defend their territories. They show real site fidelity. They'll come back to the same field year on year. And those non-breeding adults will stay together in their family groups for up to 9 years. Like this, they show real strength in numbers. And they really work together. With these birds, it really is all about the clan. Now, this is a strategy called kin selection, and it's quite rare in birds. The non-breeding adults forfeit their rights to breed, and they help their close relatives to successfully breed. Now, this is a good strategy when resources are limited. There's no point in having all the adults breeding. There'd simply be too much competition. So instead, in the case of the white-fronted geese, they help their parents to breed successfully. By raising and helping to raise siblings, they can at least ensure that some of their genes get passed on to their next generation. Now, there is a problem with the population that come here to Islay. In the last 16 years, the population has declined by 50%. Later on in the show, we're going to be meeting someone who's doing some really amazing bit of research to try and find out why, and he's doing it with this little bit of kit. For now, it's back to Sherborne and Martin.
Astonishing, we're getting live pictures from that island way up there in Scotland. Thank you very much, Gillian. Fascinating stuff. Now, if you were in a barn like this, sort of earlier on in the autumn, you might well have seen bats flittering around in it because it was so warm they didn't go and hibernate sort of as early as they should have done. I mean, hopefully on a bitter cold night like tonight they are hibernating. But in Autumn Watch, I went out to try to have a look at a small colony of lesser horseshoe bats, which is here at Sherborne. Now, it's in an old mine, and we've been told the bats were inside here. I didn't quite know what to expect, how many roosting there.
Oh, yes. Little hairy plums hanging on the ceiling.
Now, it was brilliant to see those bats, but I was frankly expecting a few more. So what we did was that after Autumn Watch, the remote camera team went back to that mine, and under strict supervision, they went in, they were allowed to go in for a short period and put cameras in and also special microphones to see what might happen. Well, the morning after they put those cameras in, they were sitting there about 5 o'clock in the morning, and something started to stir. Now, there were indeed a lot more bats, lesser horseshoe bats here. We think they're all females except for this one. Now, this one coming in is a male. So why is the male coming in to disturb these females? Well, of course, autumn is the mating season. And we think he's coming in to try to find a partner. You can see him echolocating there all around. And sure enough, he starts to cozy up to this female who really doesn't seem interested. She's probably in torpor, or she might be asleep, or she just might not fancy him, basically. But he's incredibly persistent. And he keeps on nuzzling around. If I was that female bat, I'd be furious by now and give him a slap. Anyway, eventually he gives up and he goes away and he settles down. And he has a little bit of a stretch now. And he settles down for a bit of a snooze. But by now, all that flying around seems to have sort of alerted the other bats, and they started to vocalise. Now, I said we had those microphones, special microphones in there. Of course, if we were there, we wouldn't hear anything. But these microphones bring the noises the bats are making down to our level, so we can hear them. We can not only hear them, we can see the structure of the sound in a sonogram. And this was what was going on while he was flying around in there. Weird sounds. Now, Paul Howden-Leach and Maggie Andrews, our bat experts, have listened to those, and they reckon that's a kind of a bat symphony. They're all, because the males in there are all talking to each other and getting agitated as it's going on. And this whole social calling in bats is right in the vanguard of science. So was that it? Was that all we were going to get? Fascinating though it was, that one male coming in. Well, no, the team continued to watch the remote cameras and new things started to happen. This is quite astonishing because this is horseshoe bats mating. I never thought we'd see this. The female is behind and you can see the male closely attached to her. You can actually see him thrusting there as well, and his sort of legs go in. This mating went on for more than 2 hours, in fact. It's quite a prolonged process. Other males were getting very interested in what was going on. They started to fly around as well. And eventually, the mating process finished and they separated. She had a bit of a brush down, sorted herself out, and he went away and he went off for a little bit of a preen. And if you look closely now, you can see the penis, which is remarkably big on the bat there. Now, during that process as well, those same microphones started to record what was going on while the mating was going, and we can hear, it's brought down to our level, we can hear the sound that male was making. Now, it's quite difficult to hear that. Now he's echolocating. But that first call, Maggie thinks was probably him saying, "We're busy," to any other bats, "please do not disturb us." That was kind of a do not disturb call because we're busy mating. Was that all over? It was amazing to see them actually mating. Well, no, it wasn't, because the drama continued. Another male comes in. Now, we think that this female probably is in torpor, so that she's hibernating basically, but he's coming in and he's trying to mate with her. You can see his penis there probing about, trying to mate with her. And she's cold, fast asleep, but he's very, very persistent again. This went on for about 5 minutes, him trying to mate with this female. Extraordinary footage. I never thought we'd see anything like this. The penis is remarkably big. It's really surprised some of the scientists we've shown this to, because it practically sort of comes up to the top of his chest. But she's not having any of it at all. And eventually he disappears off, leaving her alone. And once again, one more sonogram, we can hear the sound of the sound he was making, trying to mate with that female. That's a slightly grumpy male trying to mate. We don't actually know what that sound is, and Maggie is going to write a scientific paper about some of the sounds that we've been able to record. That's brand new science. This whole area of bat social calls is new. So in fact, we're glad to be able to contribute in a small way to the study of these bats. I've been working on the watches for nearly 10 years now. I've never seen behaviour like that. It's been our holy grail, and we've got some now, which is brilliant. Now, we left Sophie Darlington and her friends down on Sedgemoor trying to record both the pictures, the sounds, and also the lyrics of the moor. What did they come up with?
The Somerset Levels. Water meadows. Sedge and rushes rustling. Water shimmers, reflects. In rivers, rhines and pools. The levels managed for waders and wildfowl. Annual migrants sweeping down from the north. Male teal, chestnut and livid green. Widgeon, brown and cream. Wind ruffling feathers. Bills preening. Shovelers feeding. Black clouds in the wind. Darkness falls. A squall. Silence stretches across the water and the meadows and the low pollarded willows. In the sedge, a brown-striped snipe waits. The cold sun breaks through the cloud. Flocks of golden plovers fly and sparkle in the light. Bright snow-globed flakes on the horizon above the white farmhouses. A 125 rattles ruler straight across the levels. Gurgling comedy calls resonate and carry. The cranes. Long wings and necks and trailing legs. Then quiet. Resting, but ever aware. A jolt of alarm. A glimpse of danger. The widgeon and teal take flight. Sweep and fold. Swirling, mesmerizing forms. A wingbeat symphony. and then the sun starts to slip away.
Isn't it great when nature inspires us to be creative, and in so many ways, making films, doing a piece of art, music, dance, books. Do you know the first time I was inspired by nature was when I was
Where are we going with this?
5 years old,
Yes.
listening to the LP of Bambi, and I put a little tutu on and did a ballet dance to Drip, Drip, Drop Little April Showers.
Why
What's
am I not
yours?
surprised? It's books for me. I love books. Once a Future King by T.H. White put me in the medieval forest with wolves all around. And there's a wonderful book called Brandon Chase about 3 boys who run off into the woods and they live there the whole year. And I thought, oh, I want to do that.
You never put a tutu on then and danced around in Drip, Drip, Drop
Surprisingly, no, I didn't. No. Now, the Arts and Humanities Research Centre set up a project with 3 universities to try to study modern natural history writing, modern nature writing. And as part of that, they set out to try and find the nature's favourite natural history book. And in Autumn Watch, we asked you to try and vote for or tell us your favourite natural history book. And you came up with 278, because I'm dyslexic, get the wrong way around, yeah, 278 different books. Now, that was whittled down by a group of experts to just 10, and then we asked the nation to vote for their favourite from that 10. We are about to reveal the winners.
Let's start with in 3rd place, and it's a book by a guy called Rob Cowan, and it's this book, Common Ground. I've got to be honest, I've not read it, but it's a fantastic story apparently about his experiences of moving from London to Yorkshire and how he connects with the outdoors, and in particular explores the common ground that we share with the natural world. So huge congratulations to Rob Cowan for being in 3rd place.
Brilliant. Now, in 2nd place, one of my personal favourites, Tarka the Otter by Henry Williamson, published in 1927. It's a very non-sentimental book about Tarka and his nemesis, the Deadlock, the otter hound. A fantastic book. I met him, Michaela. I actually met him. He dandled me on his knee.
It's a great book, isn't it?
It's
a great book.
Very unsentimental, though.
What's the winning book? Well, let me tell you first that it's a deeply personal memoir about a young boy that was very shy, introverted, isolated, and he had an incredible passion, obsession, in fact, and a great connection with wildlife. I've read it, you've read it. I think a lot of our viewers have read it. It is the #1 book, Fingers in the Sparkle Jar by our very own Chris Packham.
It's a great book.
That got the vote for the best nature wildlife book. Fantastic. Well done, Chris.
Nicely.
Now, of course, if you want to be inspired by nature, you've got to get out in it. So Gillian is certainly doing that. She's getting out in nature and being inspired by the rich wildlife of Islay.
Welcome back to Islay. We are at RSPB Loch Gryniot. We're here because this is the roosting site for thousands of Greenland white-fronted geese. The numbers here are crashing. Fewer and fewer birds are returning from their breeding grounds in Greenland. And I'm joined here by Ed Burrell from the University of Exeter and the Wildfowl and Wetland Trust. Hi, Ed. Listen, Ed, the problems in Greenland, why are you studying them here on Islay?
As much as I'd love to go up to West Greenland, it's a very inaccessible place and the birds are nesting at incredibly low densities, so we simply can't get the quantity and quality of data we need to answer some of the key breeding questions.
So how is your research helping here then?
Well, here's great because they're literally all around us at the moment, so we can get a real insight, a detailed insight into their lives. And one of the things we can do is catch them and mark them with specially coded, individually coded collars and leg rings.
Right, so you can see that in this shot here.
Yeah, so the birds on the right have those coded collars, and the bird you can see on the left there has one of these new GPS tags, and that takes a GPS fix every hour, but it also has an accelerometer in it, which allows us to work out the behaviour of that bird.
So I've got one of these here, and it's quite extraordinary. This tag right here allows you not just to see where the birds are going, but also what they're doing. Now, Ed's brought this lovely graphic here that shows the level of detail that he can discern with these tags. Just talk us through this graphic over here.
So these accelerometers measure very subtly the movement in 3 dimensions. So on the left you can see a grazing trace, so it's real peaky up and down of a bird grazing grass. Then you get a digging trace, which is a bit more kind of grinding down into the soil for roots and tubers, which is a key part of their diet. And then there's 2 stationary behaviours, one sort of head up looking for predators, and one that's a bird asleep on the roost.
Okay, so what picture are you starting to build up of what's going on in the breeding grounds in Greenland?
So this kind of data is amazing because it allows us to piece together what's going on when they're up in the breeding grounds. So we can look at these adult females and see when they're trying to nest, when they're incubating, and how long those incubation bouts are lasting. And what we're starting to see so far is that most of our birds are attempting to nest. A few are successful, but lots of them are actually failing midway through incubation.
Okay.
And we don't necessarily know why that's happening. It may be predators, it may be weather events, or it may be a lack of body condition.
That is just incredible. This is a brilliant piece of research, Ed. This bit of kit is starting to provide a window into the world of a bird that breeds over 2,000 miles away. And hopefully this research is going to reverse this worrying trend of their decline in numbers. Well, it's back to Sherborne now with Chris and Michaela.
We went to Islay years ago, didn't
We did.
for Autumn Watch. Great to see those huge
Fantastic.
flocks of geese, but very sad to hear that they're in decline. But they're not the only birds that are flocking at this time of the year, so are farmland birds. Now, this is a group of birds that's in serious decline generally in the UK, but here at Sherborne, they actually do active management to attract these birds and give them a safe habitat. And this time of the year, they're flocking in these wonderful mixed groups, and you've got all sorts of birds in that flock. You've got linnets, chaffinch, yellowhammer there, also reed bunting, and the fact that they all flock together has given us the perfect opportunity to do a little bit of an experiment.
Indeed, many farmers take up countryside stewardship schemes which encourage them, in fact they subsidise them, to plant strips of plants that produce winter seeds for these birds. Other farmers, I have to say, when those plants run out, simply dig into their own pockets and they put seed like this out in the field to keep these birds going. We wanted to see which seeds appealed to which birds and how important they were in their diet. So we set up this experiment. Basically, we've got 6 trays here and we separated the seeds. We've got rapeseed in one, we've got wheat in another, canary seed, white millet, oats and sunflower. We left this out in the fields and we just waited for the birds to come in and do their work.
It's been quite a successful experiment because we've had lots of visitors. We've had a whole variety of farmland birds and a few garden birds taking advantage as well, and you can see that on lots of different seeds. Now we've got linnets again, linnets on one of the seeds there, greenfinch as well, you can see them chewing away at the seed. We've got a robin in the background. As I say, very mixed birds, blue tits and a reed bunting, but huge variety, all eating different seeds, and we've been watching them to see who's eating what and how much of it.
Who's eating what? Well, you saw the beaks working there, and we can make an analogy between those beaks and pretty much sort of household garage tools like this. Long-nose pliers, bull-nose pliers, and some secateurs. So let's take a look at the birds individually. Let's start off with the linnet, a really important farmland bird. So which seeds did the linnet go for? Here we can see them feeding on the rape, and you can see those tiny little bills, short, stubby but sharp bills, manipulating the seeds there in order to remove the husk and get to the interior. Topshop shows that the linnets are quite keen on the rapeseed. In fact, 96.5% of the time the linnets were on that. Now 1.4 on the white millet, 0.7 on the wheat. We think that might actually just be an artefact of the experiment because some of the birds were quite messy when they came to the table and they were scattering the seeds around. The linnets might have been just simply taking them out of the other trays. So the linnets are feeding on this very small seed here. This is the rapeseed, and if we use this to imitate the beak of the linnet, you can see they've got that very fine beak which allows them to hold these seeds and, of course, to crush them, remove the husk and get to the interior part. I'll try and do that, but I don't think I would have managed to. They've got a much more dexterous tool than a pair of long-nosed pliers, to be quite honest with you.
So let's have a look at one of the other birds that uses a different technique. Let's have a look at the reed bunting. Now that's got a slightly bigger beak and it has a very different technique, and you can see it picks those seeds up and gets it into the side of its beak. It's called the terminal ridge, and it slices through. You can see the white millet, that surprises 54%, canary seed and wheat 23%. So I guess the reed bunting's beak is more like these, the secateurs. And if I take one of the seeds that reed bunting was eating and put it into the secateurs, you can see, just like the reed bunting's beak, it slices through the husk and releases the seed. So very different way. It means basically that it can go for a larger variety of seeds because it has that bigger beak.
Indeed, as they did. What about the last species that we're focusing upon, the greenfinch? Now, you may think of these birds as being a garden bird, but of course, what were they doing before gardens? They were feeding out on woodland edges where these sorts of plants were growing. The greenfinches have a much stouter bill, still sharp and pointed, and you can see them there using their tongue to manipulate the seed into exactly the right place where they can place it on the tomial ridge to open it. 63% of the time, the greenfinches were on the sunflower seeds, 21% on the rape, 16% on the ripe millet, not interested in canary and wheat at all. And here, this is basically the equivalent of the greenfinch beak. This is a pair of bull-nose pliers. Same principle, just larger bill, allowing them to feed on larger seeds.
So we asked at the beginning, was this the optimal seed mix? Should it be a mix of everything? Well, certainly sunflowers are good, rapeseed's good, but I reckon we could probably get rid of the oats.
Oats?
Yeah, not anything was taking the oats, so ditch the oats. They're a cheap filler.
They are a cheap filler. But the other thing is, it's not just about the handling time with the seeds and the ability to open them, it's about the calorific reward that you get from them. And what's interesting, that of all the seeds that we've got here, the richest ones are the rapeseed and the sunflower seed. And that's what the birds were going for. They were leaving the ones which presented less calorific return for effort behind. Critically important in our farmlands because, you know, 29% of European birds are granivorous. They're eating seeds. One other neat little fact. Scientists from Oxford, Sheffield and East Anglia universities, in conjunction with the Netherlands Institute of Ecology, have been contrasting great tits in Holland and the UK. And they found that since 1970, the bills of the UK's great tits have increased in length by 0.3 of a millimetre, and they think that this is because they're feeding a lot more on bird feeders. You see, we in the UK spend £337 million a year feeding our birds, whilst our European neighbours there spend £167 million a year for the whole continent feeding birds. So we're way ahead. And there's some evidence that suggests that we're driving evolution by feeding our birds. Similar studies in the United States with house finches in Arizona have shown us exactly the same thing. Birds in cities are changing their bill shape, and here it's even changed their ability to sing. So because they developed a different shaped beak, they can't sing the same song as their original country cousins, and they're having to sing to a different tune.
That is astonishing. That's
I know, in a very short space of time.
Very, very interesting stuff. Now let's head back to Scotland, not live to Gillian on the west coast, but to the east coast, where Lucy Cook went a couple of weeks ago to take a look at one of our largest mammals and look at the fact that sometimes there's a lot more going on than meets the eye.
The UK is a relatively small group of islands, but it punches well above its weight for wildlife. Our coasts are home to almost 40% of the world's population of grey seals, and this colony on the Isle of May, off the east coast of Scotland, has been closely studied for 30 years. Every winter, they come ashore to give birth. And although it might look like a tranquil scene, Dr. Sean Twist from Durham University has been looking into the hidden stresses of seal life at this crucial time of year.
Oh my word, there's so many of them, I can't believe it. In a lot of ways, they're a mammal that wants to be a fish, really, aren't they? But unlike fish, they have to come onto land in order to breed, don't they?
Yeah.
And herein lies the problem.
The natural world is a stressful place for wild animals. You know, that is essentially natural selection. It's how well individuals cope with stress. You know, finding food, avoiding being eaten. And here, these mothers have got to raise a a nice fat pup that's going to be healthy and protect that pup from the neighbours.
And how can you tell if a seal is stressed?
Good question. Clearly, if they're fighting, there's stress there, but they very quickly go back to a resting state. And we don't think that necessarily indicates they've recovered from the stress. So we've actually been applying heart rate monitors to the seals to see what their hearts are doing.
For the first time, Sean can record the animal's behaviour and their heartbeat together. If there's a disturbance in the colony, he can compare the behaviour that he's seeing with the physiological data recorded by the heart monitor.
Gosh, you've got a lot of kit here, Sean.
Yeah, this is what we need for monitoring our seals. So we've got the camera here, and that's recording the behaviour of this female down here. And you can see that she's wearing one of our heart rate monitors.
That's her actual heart rate now?
Exactly, yeah. Mm-hmm.
She looks to me like she's pretty chilled out. She's just lying there right now. Is that a chilled out heart rate?
That is, you can see that it's pretty flat across the screen there, but there's no big changes in there. And when you do get a stressful event like a fight, or the pup wanders off and the mum panics about that, you'll see a big change in that heart rate. But the problem in a natural situation like this is it's very difficult to expose a seal to a standardised stress. Now, one fight isn't the same as another fight.
Yeah.
So we've got to come up with a way to actually expose our study seals to a very standardised, similar form of stress.
And what is that?
Well, we've got a trick there.
Enter Rocky, a remote control car that's been kitted out with cameras and speakers to monitor exactly how the seal mothers respond to stress.
Presumably this isn't going to harm the pups or the mums in any way.
No, it's a very mild stress, but we're giving them time to get used to the presence of Rocky. And as you can see, we're taking it quite nice and steady.
She's up looking around now, isn't she? And
that's right.
She's looking at Rocky, and her heart rate has gone up.
Yeah. So usually the heart rate responds to the arrival of Rocky, and then we give them 5 minutes to recover from that.
Once she's settled, Sean plays a wolf call, a natural sound, but something she wouldn't normally encounter in the wild.
Okay, so if you want to, that lever, you just flick it forward, 2 clicks, and then flick it back, and when I say go, ready, steady, go. There you go.
That's not a sound that you hear every day on the Isle of May, is it?
Exactly. So it's a novel stimulus, and you see she wasn't too worried about it. She's flickering her pup. But you can see here on the heart rate monitor, physiologically, she is showing a degree of stress response. And that's important because people often use behaviour as a measure of how stressed wild animals are, particularly to anthropogenic stressors, particularly the presence of people. And it might be that they look pretty chilled, but actually, in terms of their physiology, they are actually quite stressed.
A stressed out mother burns precious energy that could be better used producing milk for her pup.
So if you're out watching a seal colony, thinking that it's totally fine and it's okay to be the distance that you are, what your research is showing is that just because they look okay doesn't mean to say that they are.
That's right. It's just important to be careful and not go jumping around when you're out, viewing wildlife, and just take it careful and easy, essentially.
Well, it's been fascinating to discover that even though these seals may look calm, they may actually still be feeling very stressed by your presence, and that's really food for thought for those of us that love watching wildlife.
It certainly is, isn't it? Because we're constantly encouraging people to go out as we do and try and get as close to wildlife, to enjoy it as much as we do. But at the same time, some of the things that, cause stress there are very, very subtle. It'd be interesting to learn a lot more about that, and particularly in the fields of, say, wildlife photography and filmmaking. Sometimes we think we're far enough away not to be interrupting these animals. Maybe we're not far enough.
We just don't speak the same language, do we? It's all right with dogs and so on, then we can tell, but we can't with other animals.
No, with the seal. Right. I mean, if your dog's stressed. Difficult to know when the seal's stressed, but at least we're learning.
We're learning. Now, if you are feeling stressed, of course, there's no better way to de-stress than to go out and do a bit of wildlife watching, particularly, say, some bird watching, and in particular, a gorgeous bird like the lapwing. They are absolutely beautiful animals. They've got absolutely lovely iridescent feathers, hard to see in this. And they've got this lovely sort of clubbed wings. When you see a flock of them, it's very obvious. And they have that lovely crest on the top of their head. It's actually my dad's favourite bird, the lapwing. Sadly, it was, yeah, he loved a lapwing. Numbers have dropped, sadly, by about 60% in the last 40 years. But lapwing's a beautiful bird, isn't it?
Stunning.
It's a lovely thing.
Too.
Now, our cameramen went out last night and managed to film the lapwing at night. And what was going on was that under the bright moonlight, these lapwing were taking advantage of it to feed in quite a substantial flock, actually. There's that hare in the background, or is it rabbit? But they're all feeding away there, probably on worms and invertebrates in the ground. And remember, this is completely dark, more or less, well, not completely dark because the moon's out, but I still am surprised that when they fly off, these birds that are used to flying in the day don't go bashing into each other. In fact, they do look slightly wobbly, don't they? They don't look as though they're quite in control of their flight. But remarkable to see them taking advantage of the moonlight. Of course, avian predators aren't around, so it's a very sensible strategy.
And not the only species that we've seen here foraging at night. Take a look at this. Down on the Sherborne Brook, our cameramen found a heron hunting. Typical hunting strategy: still, stand and wait, and then stab. And it scores as well. So there must have been a little light here, Martin, for this bird to be hunting. And what we've seen is sometimes they will use artificial lights, street lights. If they're near a place where there's plenty of fish, the herons will turn up. In the summertime, when they have to get food for their young, they'll do that particularly a lot. And the other thing is that we have seen other birds taking advantage of human lighting. Redshanks, I remember reading a few years ago, do particularly well, wading birds, because it illuminates the mud, which would otherwise be dark, and it greatly increases their ability to optimally forage. And we found that redshanks that were foraging under our, light spillage, if you like, had much larger body mass.
I'm so impressed with that heron, mate, because of refraction. Because it's got to judge, it can't see directly, it's got to stab at a different angle. My dad used to go out trying to harpoon mullet. Is it all right to talk about that on...
I don't know, what was he doing? What were you trying to do that for?
Harpoon mullet off the back of the houseboat we went to holidays, and he never got one because he wasn't like the heron and allowed for refraction. He never got one. Just as well.
Herons obviously adapted in that department, unlike your dad.
I don't know.
What about this time of year? We're out here, I have to say, it has got cold this morning. Hand warmers in the boots, to be honest with you. Yeah. The most inhospitable environment you can imagine to be out in, top of the Cairngorms perhaps, terrible winds, ice and snow, but you could dress up warm. But you wouldn't want to jump into a loch on the west coast of Scotland this time of year, would you? Freezing cold water, I mean, you dip your fingers in there, you'd think it would be dead cold, but in fact, they'd be full of life.
And for one strange life form, these cold months herald the start of their year. These peculiar protrusions are colonial soft corals, and they've lain dormant since high summer, when encrusting orange algae overpowered them, causing them to shut down. Now, with the algae killed by the cold, pale feeding fingers or polyps start to emerge from the fleshy colonies. Waving gently in the current, each polyp beats to the rhythm of the tide. There's cilia collecting the early season plankton, and it's the polyp's ghostly colour and feathery appearance that gives this coral its common name, dead man's fingers. But names can be misleading, for these colonial beings actually bring life to this reef, creating a unique habitat for a multifaceted sci-fi cast. A tiny amphipod called Iphomedia obesa scavenges amongst the feathery polyps of the coral. Microscopic scraps litter the surface, but this little crustacean is brazen and will even try and steal food from the polyps themselves. They seem to know what it wants and shrink away as it comes close. It causes little harm to the colony, but lurking nearby is a genuine threat. Tritonia homburgi. This sea slug only lives for a year, but is entirely dependent on dead man's fingers throughout its short life. Its eyes are extremely primitive, relying instead on a pair of sensory tentacles called rhinophores to build a chemical picture of their world to find their food. Sensing danger, the dead man's finger retracts its polyps, but it's still vulnerable. Unlike hard corals that have a protective calcified casing, soft coral is rubbery, and Tritonia's jaws are more than capable of biting through it. Much of the reef bears the pockmarked scars of past Tritonia's feasting. And with a captive food source, they grow quickly, reaching a whopping 8 inches in length, making them the UK's largest sea slug. Despite the onslaught, the dead man's fingers thrive in these cold waters. And at this time of the year, they've put themselves in prime position to take advantage of the plankton-rich spring tides. Who'd have thought it? A winter reef teeming with life at the bottom of a Scottish loch, all built on a colonial creature with death in its name.
I just can't believe there's that much colour and explosion of life in that freezing cold loch. Amazing.
Hats off to the cameraman for getting in that freezing cold loch. Now, at the beginning of the programme, we showed you a tantalising view of a stoat in its winter coat, an ermine, and we asked if anyone else had seen any ermine around the country. Well, guys, take a look at what's been sent in. This is astonishing. This is from Jill Hardy in Dalwhinnie in the Kangles. This is in her back garden. And look at that, it's an ermine rolling an egg. 14 chicken eggs that she'd put out there.
That's
it
amazing.
Rolled along the patio to cache. Have you ever seen an ermine?
Do you know what? In 18.7 blue moons, I've never seen an ermine.
I know, amazing, isn't it? Actually, we've had some more pictures as well. Take a look at these. Now, this one is from...
Simon
Who's
West.
It from Simon
Simon
West. Don't know where it's from. Please tell us where your pictures are from. We'd love to know. And look at this one. This is from Pat Wallace on Facebook.
I'm just going to tell you something very quickly, Michaela. Here's a quote. It says, this is from the Renaissance writer Thomas Peacham. He reminds us to keep our minds and consciences as pure as the ermine keeps its fur. I fancy I've told you something to think about there.
Is it? Do you do that?
Yeah, my fur's always spotless.
Oh, yeah, right.
Absolutely spotless.
Muddy ermine, I fear.
Well, that's it for tonight, but stick around because we're doing, once again, a Facebook Live, so go to the Springwatch Facebook page. We'll be answering some of your questions. Tomorrow is our final show, sadly. Gillian will still be up in Isla, where she'll be investigating the hen harrier population.
And we'll be taking a look at our badgers to see where they've been and how they've been using the resources. Having to catch up with Kate and Mark.
And I shall be having a nocturnal adventure as I search for an enchanting bird, catching it in the middle of the night. What will that be all about? Anyway, tomorrow night we're on at 9 o'clock.
An hour later.
And immediately after this, Michaela's going to take over on Facebook and we're going to be answering questions you send in. So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Good night.